That's the photo you guys want to see. This is Owen. He is our 8-month-old. He's sitting in the back right now. He's moving around too much to bring him up on stage. And I want to start with this. I am really proud of him. He, out of all his little buddies, I feel like was the first to start crawling. Super proud. I was like, I'm competitive. And so I want Owen to do everything first. But I'm realizing now, after 2 months of him crawling, that there's some bad sides to him being active when all my other dad friends just get to place their kid down and not have to go chase him around the house all the time. And it's really had me change or have to review, reimagine. It's made us reframe what success looks like. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, reframing success. But before we get into that, Abby's going to introduce us.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I want to first off start by saying thank you. I know you guys have given a lot of prayer, a lot of thought, a lot of time, and a lot of money to be able to support the Flagstaff planting. And so I'm excited to be able to share a little bit about us. And then Brian is also going to be sharing a lot about what's been going on in the Flagstaff Church and what's been happening because of your generosity. So again, my name's Abby. This is Brian. We have our little Owen. We became disciples. I became a disciple back in 2013. Brian back in 2010. We've been all over the country. Brian grew up in Nashville. I grew up in San Diego. He went to Virginia Tech. And we met up in Washington State. And so we actually got married about 4 years ago. We never really expected to go into ministry. We both went into ministry separately and then met because of our shared love of passion of ministry. But we were just never the people that we thought would go into ministry. I'm naturally very introverted. Brian wanted to be an actuary. But God really called us into ministry. And through those first few years of ministry, I feel like He really prepared us and put it on our hearts to eventually go onto a mission team or to serve on a church plant. And so it was around the time that we actually got married. We didn't know this. Again, God was doing all of His things and working things out. Ken Burford, who's a member of the Phoenix Church now, he and his wife were up in Flagstaff serving the group of disciples that was up there. And he decided, you know what, we need full-time staff up here. We need a full-time couple to come and lead this church. And so he really started to get the ball rolling. And in that, we heard about it and applied. And so we were so excited. When we went to go visit, we were so excited about the vision, about this town who really desperately needs Jesus. And so we fell in love with Flagstaff. We fell in love with the people that were there. And so we've been there for now about 3 years. It is a steep learning curve, learning how to lead a church. Brian and I both were in campus ministry for several years before stepping into the church leading role. But we had a lot to learn. We weren't parents. We didn't know what that was like. And so one of the things that we've learned is kind of this idea of what Brian's going to talk about today, which is reframing success. And really, what does that look like to be successful, not in humans' eyes, but really in God's eyes? So, thank you guys.
So, yeah, we launched about 3 years ago, and this was kind of the original team off on the left. I got to give a shout out to the Winklers. They snuck in here somewhere. Where'd they go? They're back there. They joined us for 1 month. Super happy to have them. But a year later, we had grown a ton, and it was, I forgot. I don't get this fancy stuff up in Flagstaff. I don't even use a mic up in Flagstaff still. I have other people use it, but I'm too loud. So yeah, it's been amazing to see what has happened. It's been really exciting. There's been so much growth. All in all, I think we've had 25 baptisms since we launched. And so that was a year in, 2 years more. It's just been really, really fun. There are challenges, though. And there are challenges throughout from where we began to even now. I think I want to put it on y'all's hearts to start praying for some of the current challenges we're facing. We have had 40% of the church move out in the past year and a half. So our church at our largest in membership was 43, and we've had 20 or 21 people move out in the past year and a half. And so obviously that in itself is a little like a blow. It's a little bit of a discouragement. The people there, we're still faithful, we're still ready, but it's definitely different walking into a church of 60 or 65 to a church of 40. And so we're gearing up, ready to launch into this new school year. But along with having a lot of people move financially, it's been a little difficult. We're trying to figure out some ways to kind of keep us from losing too much cash right now. So please be praying for those things. And while you're doing that, flip on over to John chapter 3. You guys have been going through a series on the book of John, and I've been asked to preach in John chapter 3, verse 22 through 25. Or through 30. In verse 22 it says, "After this, Jesus and his disciples went onto the Judean countryside, where he spent some time with them and baptized. Now John was also baptizing at Enon near Salim, because there was plenty of water, and people were coming to be baptized." This was before John was put in prison. Verse 25, "An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. They came to John and said to him, 'Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him.' To this John replied, 'A person can receive only what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. He must become greater. I must become less." Again, our title is Reframing Success with the focus on he must become greater, I must become less. There are some things, though, that we could have talked about, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. Some kind of assumptions to this sermon. Assumption number one is that you're here because you want to be like Jesus. Number two, that the ministry of Jesus, whether you're paid to do it or you're just doing it because you're so thankful for God, we are all a part of that ministry. And we are all doing that work. And then finally, baptism, or helping people live the baptized life, is the action of ministry. That's what we see John and Jesus doing. Their ministry, they are baptizing people. And they are trying to help more and more people get baptized and ultimately live the baptized life. It's been a lot of fun to see how different people in Flagstaff are going after that goal. We have, my wife and I live with one of the single sisters in Flagstaff, and it's incredible to see how focused she is at building great friendships at work. That she is trying to include them in as many church things as possible. We have a guy named Preston who works as a nurse, and he's doing his best to help his patients live a baptized life. And we'll talk about one of his patients later on. And then finally, we got Bailey and Jenna who come from Phoenix. It's amazing. They've joined this program called Apartment Life, which they are now responsible for running like community events in their apartment complex. They get paid to do it, and the events are sponsored by an organization, and they just get to do it and basically invite as many people as they can to church. If you leave kind of any one of these three things out of our walk with God, our journey of living the Christian life, it doesn't work right, and it doesn't seem to fit. And what I mean by this is, imagine somebody was going to go out and join the Marines. And they got to boot camp and said, hey, you know what? I'm so excited to be here, but I don't run. That's not going to go over well with the instructors. I had a drill instructor for one of my finance class in college. I was scared to death of that guy. But that's not in my notes, so I won't go down that rabbit hole. But we have got to make sure we have these three components in our life as we look into this sermon. Point number one is focus on self leads to failure. We read in the first paragraph, these first two slides of the scripture, that some of John's disciples start having an argument. And you put yourself in this story as a disciple of John. They're seemingly having really great success in their ministry, right? They've baptized Jesus. They've baptized a lot of other people. They've rebuked the Pharisees a couple times. They haven't been arrested yet, so I'd say that's successful. Right? They are having success, and here comes this big bump where they have an argument, and then after that argument, they go up to John and say, hey, Jesus is having everybody go to him instead of coming to us. I think for anyone, especially for us, if we put ourselves in the shoes of John's disciples, it's really easy to take pride in what we're doing. It's really easy to take pride, especially to say, hey, you know what? I'm a part of something successful. But it's fascinating how fast that thought goes to a focus on ourself rather than a remembrance of why we're doing what we're doing. As things began to focus, as the disciples began to, in a sense, focus on themselves, arguments, debating doctrine, and envious spirit came upon them. And for us, these two things happen just as frequently when we start focusing on ourselves. We start arguing, and we start getting envious. I think the arguments we have, sometimes they are about doctrine. But I think the frustrating thing for me, and probably for many of us, is when we start arguing about things that aren't really important. When we start arguing about preferences rather than really what needs to be done, which is the work of the ministry. How much time do we spend arguing? What do we spend arguing about? We argue about how a specific event should be run. Oh, you know what? That event could have been done better. Or that event, I deserve to plan that event type stuff. We argue about decisions our leaders make. Hey, you know what, we should be focusing on outreach or inreach, or we should be focusing on speaking the truth or speaking love, right? Like, it's like we can argue all about that stuff instead of working the ministry and doing what Jesus did, and it leads to failure. When it comes to being envious, John's disciples are looking across and saying, look at what Jesus' group is doing. They're experiencing jealousy. And I think all of us have something on the other side of the river. Right? They're looking across that river and saying, I wish we were experiencing that. And I think I just want to ask you guys, are you able to celebrate the victories and fruitfulness of other people? I know for me, I mentioned I was competitive. I want to win. I hate losing. But one of the things I've really learned in reframing success, especially with leading a small church, leading a mission team, is that we have got to be wanting other people to find victory. And you have got to not just be wanting your victory on your own, but wanting someone else's victory. I heard a friend share that he was really discouraged because he hadn't helped someone become a Christian that semester of college or that semester of campus ministry. And his wife, who was leading the ministry with him, had converted a few people. And his church leader just said, would you rather it the other way? Would you rather you have converted the 3 people and your wife not have converted anyone? And it just reframed everything for him. That, you know what, I don't need to be envious. I just need to celebrate the victories that we have together. There's a game that I'm sure many of us has played called Mafia. There's another variation called Werewolf. And in that game, there are people, you know, it's a secretive game, right? Like, you're trying to, as the mafia, kill off the civilians. It's just a game. And the civilians are trying to figure out who the mafia is. And it is amazing to see what happens when a group starts playing that game and trying to figure it out. Because everyone forgets that the majority of the people are on the same team. And instead, people are devouring each other about what is going on. Instead of remembering that, hey, we're on the same team. You and I, my success in Flagstaff, your success here, your success in this row, your success in that row, it's all the same victory. We're on the same team. If we continue to argue or be envious, we're going down a path of failure rather than finding success. Oh, I was going to share. Oh, sorry. Oh, I see what I'm doing. It's not a left and right. There's one on top of the other. So I keep pressing the right and the left, but it's just the forward button both times. So these are some of the victory stories I'm most proud of. From this past year, Miss Christie's baptism, and last year was Taylor's baptism. And why I'm so happy about these stories is because it's not that I got to participate in them, or I got to be there. It's the fact that my dad reached out to his coworker and converted someone. And he got to see that victory. My dad moved across the country to join us in Flagstaff, to be a part of the church. And he got to help his coworker become a Christian after really having a drought in helping people become Christians in a long time. And Merle got to be in those Bible studies as well. And then Miss Christie's baptism, I mentioned this guy, Preston. He's reaching out to his patients at work. And after she got released from his clinic, she came out to church, brought her family, his wife, Preston's wife, Brooke, and my mom got to study the Bible and baptize Grandma Christie. And it was such a big victory for all of them. And therefore, it's maybe some of my proudest moments for the church. But let's move to the other side of the coin. When we focus in on Jesus, that is when we have success. I'm going to read verse 27 again. It says, "To this John replied, a person can receive only what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him, and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine and is now complete. He must become greater, I must become less." I picture John after kind of hearing what his disciples had talked to him about. I just picture him kind of like down his head and just shakes. Because ultimately, he responds with this response of, you think I am in this for the greatness. But in reality, I, John, am in this because it's my calling from God. He goes on, you think my joy comes from my personal success, but in reality, my joy comes from Jesus being successful. And he explains this using a wedding illustration, comparing himself to be the best man of Jesus' wedding. Now, I've gotten the chance to be a best man a few times, and I believe there is only one job for the best man, and that is to make sure the groom shows up on time to the ceremony. Right? The best man, some people argue that they've got the speech, and I'm like, that doesn't matter. The best man can blow the speech as long as the groom's there on time. Now, on the flip side, the maid of honor has like a bazillion responsibilities. Now, have you guys ever watched a movie, or worse, seen this happen in real life, where the best man or the maid of honor tried to make the wedding about themselves? There's a couple movies out there that have the maid of honor making it about them. How odd would it be to go to a real wedding, not just one you're watching on a screen, but go to a wedding, and just how cringy it would be to see the best man trying to draw attention to himself during the ceremony. It would be so awkward, because the most important people are not the best man or the maid of honor. It's the bride and the groom. It is Jesus in this illustration. And for us, we have to not be the disciples who want to be more important than Jesus. We have to be the disciples who lower ourselves beneath Jesus, elevating him and saying, you are more important than me. Abby's going to share a story about this.
All right, so I'm going to circle back to Miss Christie here. Brooke's husband had met her. She was a patient. And I think it's easy to look at somebody who is older than you or be somebody who's older and have a hard time taking or changing your mind about what you already believe. And so both Kathy and Brooke are actually younger than Miss Christie. We call her Miss Christie, as she's our grandma in Flagstaff. She's kind of adopted. Yeah, she's like adopted all of us as her grandchildren. But I got the privilege of stepping into her counting the cost study as she was deciding, like, okay, am I really going to make Jesus Lord of my life and get baptized? And I was absolutely floored with her humility to Jesus. For her to be able to sit there and be like, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to seek Jesus with all of my heart, was insane to me. And I think for me, sitting there as a younger woman, I looked at her and I was like, that is who I want to be when I am your age. Like, I hope that I get to see and be like that. Because her eyes were not focused on all of the problems in her family, which there were plenty. She's lived a lot of life, guys. But her eyes were so focused on Jesus. And because of that, there was such clarity in what she knew she needed to do. And there was such joy in her heart that I was like, this is beautiful. I am so grateful I just get to sit here and watch you fall in love with Jesus. And she was explaining to me, she was like, Abby, I went out to the entire retired community that she was living in, and every person she talked to, she was like, I'm getting baptized this weekend. Guys, I'm getting baptized this weekend. And people were like, okay. But she was just so fired up about what God had done in her heart and in her life and is doing in her family now, that she just couldn't help but like share and point to Jesus. And so I think that these stories like these are the greatest successes when people's eyes are not focused on themselves, focused on, there's a million reasons why she should have not chose Jesus. But she had that one, which was Jesus, and she was not going to take her eyes off of it. And so because of that, her light was able to shine so greatly to everybody in her retirement community. Her entire family came out to her baptism, and we're so encouraged by the decision she's been making. So just wanted to share about her. If you guys ever come up to Flagstaff, give her a big old hug.
I don't need that. What? Reinforcing this idea, John, at the end of the next paragraph in verse 36, he says, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them. I know for me, I spent far too long in church rejecting Jesus. Rejecting his importance, elevating my importance over him. If you are here this morning and you feel like you're in that spot where you've been either rejecting Jesus, maybe even just trying to keep things equal, that I'm just as important as Jesus, I want, obviously think about it yourself, but I want you to have a conversation with someone about it. Be vulnerable. I often call these IHOP conversations. And the reason I call them IHOP conversations, for me, before I was married, they would always happen late at night with guys. And IHOP was the only thing open. So we would always go to IHOP and have these conversations where we just said, hey, here's what's going on. I am elevating myself too much. I'm focused on myself too much. I need to focus in on Jesus, and I'm ready to do that. What do you think I need to do? It is amazing when we take the focus off ourselves and put the focus in on Jesus. It is so much fun and phenomenal to see it when it happens in other people's lives. It's refreshing when it happens in your own life. Daniel sitting up here. Daniel Rustrom, he doesn't know. I tried to catch him on his way in to tell him I was going to talk about him, but he said hi, and we were singing a song, so he came on in. Daniel is an amazing guy. If you haven't met him or hung out with him, he's so much fun, and he's just a great, kind-hearted guy. When we first, though, got to Flagstaff, I remember sitting down for lunch with Daniel, and Daniel said, hey, you know what? I kind of run at my own pace. I'll be there at Sunday, but, if I don't really want to be at something, I'm not going to be there. Sorry to throw you under the bus there for a second. But what was phenomenal is Daniel's transformation of stopping focusing on himself over really even just that first year we were in Flagstaff together, to of focusing on Jesus. Because by the time Daniel left Flagstaff to move back here to Phoenix, I hate that your office shut down your Flagstaff branch. But by the time he moved down here, he was planning more events than anyone else in the church. He was running our tech ministry. He was just doing more than anybody else, basically, in the church. So he went from a focus on self to a focus on Jesus, which led to transformation. And he had, when he left, so much better relationships. His spirituality was so much deeper than it was before. It was a phenomenal transition. I wish I had time to share more stories of Ethan or Isaac, Jenna, Bailey, Destiny, Alex, Bruce, Rachel. We mentioned Preston and Brooke, my parents, right? These are people who shifted their focus from themselves to a focus on Jesus. These are all people who moved to Flagstaff to help launch the church. Ethan was actually our only college student when we started. And it's amazing. He kickstarted our college ministry, and since then we've seen 16 college students get baptized. It's not just people moving to Flagstaff, but people have given financially to us to get us launched. People have given time. Aaron came up, Busteos, he came up for a weekend, met a young lady outside of Target. She came out to church. She got baptized, has gone on to baptize a couple more people. She was an intern for us this summer. It's amazing when people have a focusing on Jesus, they don't do things for themselves. They do things for Jesus. And so as I close out, I want to ask, are you ready to take the focus off of yourself? Are you ready to put the focus in on Jesus? Because this is where we see success. You could baptize just one person compared to someone who baptizes 100. But because we're focusing on Jesus, because you focus in on Jesus, it's successful. But once we focus in on self, start arguing, start being envious, it becomes a disaster. I want to give some possibilities of what this might look like for you. I'm just throwing these out here. Maybe someone will take me up on it. Option number one, after you start focusing on Jesus, this could look like you becoming a reinforcement in the Flagstaff church. We need some people. I'm hoping we can have some more people move up to Flagstaff. It is amazing the life, the energy that new people bring when they move in to help a small church. And then secondly, it was mentioned you guys are working on your missions contribution, your missions offering for this year. I want you to consider a sacrificial gift for a missions offering. I think it's easy because we do these so often to just write the same thing down on the check every year. But I want you to consider, could we give and make our gift sacrificial this year? Because I know up in Flagstaff, financially we're hurting. I know other places you guys give need your support desperately. You guys are in an incredible place, and we're so grateful. As long as I think the Philippines and other places, we're grateful for what you guys have given to us. And it's amazing to see what can be done through your generosity. And so I ask, become some reinforcements for us, or consider a sacrificial financial gift. Thank you.